All right, y'all. Hey. Welcome. We were supposed to go live at 8:45, but I did not do my whole prayer, getting everything set up. So I just wanted to apologize, for not going live at the time that we said across all of our social medias. But welcome. I'm getting my leg in my crisscross applesauce position, making sure that this switchmacom does not drive me too crazy. So I'm going to move myself over before we get started so that I don't hit my dream catcher. Alrighty, so welcome. My name is Jasmine. This is Flourish Homestead and Apothecary, and this is our Libra Full Moon 2025 Astrotalk Masterclass. Here at Flourish Homestead and Apothecary, we specialize in African indigenous mindset work rooted in home ecology, shadow work, shamanism, herbalism, astrology, astroastrology, and so many different aspects of who we are. But overall, one thing that we always do is we use the lunation cycle, we use astrology to be in the natural sync, in the natural flow of life. So hold on one second. Allergies have been kicking my butt, and honestly, my house is warm enough today to cook fried chicken on the motherfucking step. Anyways, and this full moon has been trying me, but I will not let it get the best of me. Anyways, so I'm gonna take this time, and you should too. So this is the point where you should pause me if you don't have no water, if you don't have no snacks, because when I say this is a master class, it's a master class. It is also a master class that is accompanied with our beautiful interactive workbook and journal for the Libra full moon, over 60 pages. I said it again, 60 pages worth of information, okay, to help you particularly get through this Libra full moon. This is the first Libra full moon that we've had since 2022, where the energy, the lunar energy and Libra's energy were not highlighted because Libra spent the last 2 years from 2022 up until 2025 or 2023. I'm sorry. In or the South Node was in Libra, right? So what does all of this mean? And why is it so important? So for the first time in 2 years, we haven't had a restriction of Libra energy. So all of the harmony and the balance and maybe the more balanced qualities of Libra's energy really struggled to be highlighted, specifically in the areas around relationships, and boundaries and belonging. Like, who's your tribe? Those were some of the things that came up between 2022 and 2025. Okay. And all of this energy, number one, is highlighted in our workbook. Now, this workbook is very, very special, and it's very, very different from our solar Aries eclipse and new moon workbook that came out 2 weeks ago. This particular workbook is rooted in African traditional religions. So that includes Vodun, that includes Ifa, and Ifa is known as the Yoruba religion or the Agbani religion, with the people who are my people, because my family is Yoruba. We come from that land, and that is what they call themselves, the Anago people, the Agbani people, right? And so we highlight ways to work with Libran energy, with celestial body energy in that way. We also highlight the fact that we are Black American within this homestead and apothecary, and a Black American grouping and collecting of people who understand that we come from hoodoo roots. And so that is the highlighting of the hoodoo aspect, right? Particularly that is highlighted in our homestead and apothecary. In addition, we also have highlighted that I'm a practitioner of Kemetic spiritual sciences. And Kemetic spiritual science could be viewed as a religion, but overall it is a spirituality, and also it is a science. It is a way of thinking. It is a way of observing. It is a way of deducing. It is a way of understanding systems in all of its individual parts. And so we will be highlighting those aspects within this workbook. Again, 60 pages for only $15. This will be the last workbook where it'll be a soft launch. So any of our workbooks will typically now be anywhere between $20 and $22, because of course we got to pay the ancestors and we got to pay to keep lights on in order for us to stay healthy and continue to give out these workbooks that induces healing across our collective. And so, unfortunately, we are going to have to charge market value rates in order for our rates to be comparable for the needs that we have within the apothecary. So, wanted to highlight that, and wanted to highlight that there are also aspects of the workbook, primarily the last 20 pages, that will walk you through correspondence, rituals, and other things that might be for people who are not a part of the African, the Black, or the indigenous cultures, religions, or spiritualities that might be highlighted in the first part of the workbook. Because we know here at Flourish Homestead and Apothecary, we are very much so rooted in our culture. We are very much so rooted in our land rights. We are very much so rooted in how our ancestors, our blood and bone, interpreted natural universal laws, cosmic phenomenons, but also we're connected to source, to spirit, to creator, to God, whatever you call higher power. So now that I gave that intro, we're about to hop right onto it after I drink this water. Oh, y'all. Thank you for hanging out with me today. And this is the point where I go and I toggle over to the presentation. From time to time, I will be going back into where I stream to make sure that there are no comments or whatever else. But please put comments, questions, concerns, or any tech issues that we might be experiencing in the comment section, and I'll be sure to hop right on that. So yeah, this is our Libra full moon guide. I am pulling up my notes now so that I can follow along. If you want to know what my notes are or what I'm reading off of, I'm quite literally reading off of our interactive correspondence journal and guide. So like I'm saying, you should get on it. Alrighty. So welcome to the Libra full moon, and this isn't the workbook, this is the corresponding presentation that goes along with the workbook. And so what are some of the things that we'll be highlighting for this Libra full moon? Number one, I just wanted to say thank you for all of the people who supported our last workbook and has supported Flourish Homestead and Apothecary so far. We are growing at rates that still continue to amaze me every single solitary day. And I just wanted to say that. And so, number one, I just really want to talk about who is this workbook for. This workbook is for people who have Libra placements, specifically Libra placements in your big six. So what are the big six? Big six is the sun, the moon, your rising / ascendant, your Mercury, your Venus, or your Mars. Those are your big six. We can also add technically Jupiter, which could be considered a personal planet, but is typically considered more so of a generational one, right? This is also for people who had nodal connections. As we talked about, this is the first time in about 18 months that we haven't had energy restrictions around Libra as a collective. So this is for anyone who worked with particularly the South Node being in Libra for the past 18 months until January 2025, right? And also, this is for people who may have had their South Node in Libra. This is for people who are mystics, people who understand the mysteries, the in-betweens, the gray areas of life, but also are very spiritual, might be healers, might be energy workers, might be other astro herbalists like myself, right? And also for people who are sacred practitioners, whether you are a sacred practitioner in your own cultural or spiritual or religious rites, or you are a person who has been spirit and pain initiated and you walk the journey of spirituality and discovery by yourself, this book is made for you. Okay. And so some of the things that we will be highlighting while we are working through this workbook, we already talked about that, is the Libra placements. Is number one, we're opening with making sure that we understand that anything that we do within the homestead and apothecary is rooted in spiritual reclamation and honoring our cultural lineage. And again, the cultural lineage of Flourish is rooted in Hoodoo, Ifa, Yoruba traditions, Voodoo traditions, and also Kemetic spiritual science. One thing we have to highlight and talk about is the fact that most of these are closed practices. So, African traditional religions, such as Ifa, such as Voodoo, and Hoodoo, Santorini, Candomblé, are closed practices, right? These practices are closed because they are naturally what the West calls animistic. Animistic means that the people are connected and from the land, and they have ancestors who have lived and died on the land. So anytime we are talking about any of the African traditional religions and also the indigenous knowledge systems that are embodied and embedded within Flourish, we are talking about spiritual systems that must be connected to physical places in the world and the indigenous people who come from those physical places in the world. Oftentimes, outside of Abrahamic religions, we see cultural and spiritual appropriation of other people's cultures, other people's land rights, other people's histories, and other people's ancestors' understanding of the spiritual energy that they were able to call down. None of these spiritual systems can be separated from the people who called down this energy. Okay? And so, if you are a person who is not of blood of culture and has not been initiated into any of the African traditional religions, some of the things that we talk about, you may not be able to participate in because of that. And so this workbook or the corresponding workbook, but also this free masterclass, is a reminder that certain portions are for reverence, but not for practice, okay? And the primary thing that we have to understand is that even if you are in the lineage of the culture from the land, anytime you're working with the African traditional religions, you have to work with communities. Communities are your last sacred mirror and the ultimate form of accountability and responsibility. So the reason why initiation is important is because it recognizes the communal aspects of our religion and our spiritual sciences that were not separate and apart from how we interacted within our indigenous social systems or our indigenous cultural systems, which were innately matriarchal and innately communal. Okay? And so, oftentimes, if you are not initiated and you are of blood, culture, and bone, or you are not of blood, culture, and bone, and you cannot be initiated, you have to understand that in order to evoke these deities, you A, wouldn't be able to do it. B, it could be dangerous if you actually understand the science behind spirituality. But B is poor spiritual alignment, right? And number two, if you are not connected to your ancestors, if you don't practice ancestral veneration, if you don't practice veneration of your Ori or your highest self, you are also not able to practice these closed practices. Because in order to venerate the deities within these closed practices, or to work with the deities of the land, such as in our indigenous knowledge systems, you would have to be in close community with your ancestors and the land that gave you the opportunity to be initiated. So I wanted to overly explain that portion, because from now on, all of our master classes and all of our workbooks and everything that we do will publicly, it always has been that way, but publicly will be rooted in these aspects of honoring our cultural lineage and also cultural reclamation. Okay, we've already talked about that. Oh, I guess we can talk about it a little more. So, when we're talking about hoodoo, we are talking about a closed spiritual practice, and this might be a good glossary kind of overgoing of what are the differences. It's a closed Black American spiritual practice rooted in ancestral veneration and land-based rituals that require proper lineage and initiation. Ifa or Yoruba traditions is a sacred and ancient tradition that comes from what we would consider to be modern day Africa, modern day Nigeria in Africa. And the Ifa or Yoruba religion is a spiritual religion that is over 10,000 years old, right? Where Oludumare called down Obatalua, and then Obatalua had a brother, right, who became the first king or the first ruler of the Yoruba nation. And so the Ifa religion is based upon the deities that Oludumare called down into this realm to create this world, but also of the king god who was one of our first ancestors who began our lineage, right? The Voodoo tradition comes from the Dahomey Empire that is a little bit south of Nigeria. So we had descendants that left Nigeria, went to modern Benin or Togo, and created the powerful Dahomey Empire. And with that, they took elements of Ifa and evolved it to the Vodun tradition, right? The Vodun tradition, like we said, comes from the Dahomey Empire, and during Mafa was transferred to many of our Caribbean brothers and sisters who came to this portion of the world, but also were in Turtle Island, right? So those are the cultural lineages that we highlight and we protect when we're within the apothecary, but it's also what we work within. These are the spiritual systems that we work within. The next one is Kemetic spiritual science. I am tuning in just to make sure that everything is all good. Okay, everything is all good on y'all end. So Kemetic spiritual science, again, is one of our oldest spiritual practices. It came from ancient Egypt. So Kemet is the name that we, the people who actually came from Egypt, right, called Egypt before it was colonized. So we know that we had the Hellenistic period in astrology that is often connected to the Potomac, or one of the last dynasties of ancient Egypt, right? And so this is basically our spiritual religion that came from our ancestors who came from Egypt or Nubia or Sudan. So why do we talk about this as if like all Black people have ancestors who come from Egypt? And the truth is, we all do. So we know that life was started in the Great Rift in Africa, in and around Ethiopia, Kenya, Sudan, or what then was called Nubia. These are where our first ancestors came. Also, the Great Rift goes all the way down to modern day South Africa, okay? And basically, the large civilization that became Kemet, Egypt, was a gathering place for all of ancient Africa and all of the science, including the spiritual science that came out of Africa. And Kemet was used as a beacon or a learning center for all of the knowledge that we had all over Africa, but particularly that came out of the Great Rift. So, if you have skin like minds, there is no likelihood, there is a fact that your family at one point in time considered themselves to be Kemetic, Nubian, or Egyptian. So just wanted to say that. And again, the Kemetic spiritual system is an ancient Egyptian spiritual knowledge system that is focused on alignment with the cosmic order, but also with the divine principles of Ma'at. And the cosmic order calls for alignment of Ma'at or balance. Ma'at is also a deity within Kemetic spiritual science. And it basically is making sure that we live a balanced life of truth, balance, in cosmic orders, right? This comes from the energy of the Madu Natures or Natsuru, which is divine principle, which is to understand how to be able to navigate through life's problems. And with that, we have the Aturu or the ethers, which is what we call the energy centers that have oftentimes been appropriately called chakras. Now, if you are not of the Hindu or the Indus Valley religions, or even the Afro-Indus, because there are Afro-Indus people who make up some portions or some of the earliest versions of Hindu culture and Hindu religion, you probably shouldn't use the term chakra. You should figure out what it's called in your cultural lineage. But for many of us who are Black or who are of African descent, we call it Aturu, which is the plural version, and then we call it Aether or Ether as the singular version. In our Yoruba traditions, we call them Ori, which is what we also call our highest selves. Well, it's a bit deeper than that, but you know, for other purposes, I will not get into that. Okay. All right. So, before we hop into the deepest of the deep, I just wanted to say thank you so much to the people who purchased the Aries Solar Eclipse and New Moon workbook. And thank you for continuing to journey with us and walk with us on this path. Unfortunately, that workbook did not have hourly as many hoodoo, African traditional, or religious, Kemetic science, or indigenous knowledge in it. But from here on out, all of our workbooks will pertain to that. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for choosing us to be a part of your healing and the guidance and everything else, okay? Alrighty. And so this is a part of a larger collection that we are rolling out called our Hoodoo Book of Power series. Let's just give it up. Let's just give it up. So number one, we have to talk about the fact that this workbook, this presentation wasn't just written by me. It was called down. So I would like to thank my Ori, my Alasis, and there are many Alasis who helped me call down and channel the energy for this workbook that also turned into this masterclass or this presentation that you are currently watching. Flourish is an emanation of my own healing first. And so everything that you see is an emanation of the personal work, the personal shamanism, the personal medical medicine woman work that I've done on myself as my own holistic wellness practitioner. That's number one. Okay. So I just wanted to say that and to say that in addition to this being something that is deeply spiritual, deeply connected to Source Creator, deeply connected to the deities that I walk with, deeply connected to my ancestors, understand that nothing I do is because of my own genius. Now, keep in mind, I am a womb carrier. I'm a highly melanated womb carrier. So this is my genius. But it's also the genius of every mother, every foremother, every forefather, every past life, and every portion of metaphysical energy that walks with me in this lifetime. All right? All right? All right? All right. So just wanted to say that because I did not make that clear in the last workbooks, right? And so each thread that we work through is an amalgamation of like our spiritual intelligence, right? And that's the one thing that I want to start to introduce is that the spiritual technologies, the spiritual intelligence that we call down is not separate and apart from the other technologies that we use. Like right now, we are on the internet. I am talking to you from my laptop. I have two well-lit lights in my room. I have a YouTube video playing 528 hertz right now, right? This presentation is online, as you can see. So, with that being said, we are talking about the spiritual technology or the spiritual intelligences that our ancestors always knew about and always called it that. And I really didn't learn until I started to walk the journey with African traditional religions, right? And so for this Libra full moon workbook, we will be talking about lunar wisdom. So not only will we be talking about the Libra complete lunar cycle, we'll also be talking about dream and ancestral work that is connected to lunation cycles, okay? We'll be talking about sacred elements. We'll be talking about crystals. We'll be talking about herbs. We'll be talking about practices that are historically associated with Libra. But we will also be talking about some hoodoo, some Kemetic, and some African traditional religious practices that could be or are traditionally associated with Libra energy through that specific cosmology system. Okay? We'll also be talking about energetic alignment. We will be introducing the concept of reclaiming energy centers being called ethers or Arturus while we are talking about energy centers from a Black and from an Indigenous perspective, right? And we'll also be working with which ritual and correspondence practices that are rooted in these practices, but also using our journaling and our reflective prompts from that mindset work and from that ability to do that sort of shadow work. All right. So here is the current astrology. You have the sun, right? At 23 degrees and 20 minutes of Aries in the sixth house. The moon is at 23 degrees and 20 minutes of Libra in the 12th house. Of course, the sun and the moon opposing each other is what makes a full moon. You have a Mercury that just went direct recently, April 5th, currently at 26 degrees and 52 minutes of Pisces in the fifth house. We are going to be talking about the fifth house a lot because it's coming up a lot during this full moon. Also, Venus. Venus is at 23 degrees and 31 minutes Pisces in the fifth house. It also went direct April 7th. Whew, thank you. And I'll be even happier when Venus moves into Mars. Venus moves into Aries, but what do I know? Anyways, Mars is still in Cancer at 25 degrees and 26 minutes in the ninth house. Jupiter is at 16 degrees and 50 minutes Gemini in the 8th house, and it is currently trining. So a trine is a positive conversation with the full moon. Saturn is at 25 degrees and 7 minutes Pisces in the 5th house. Chiron is also in Aries along with the sun, so it is opposing the moon, right? and is at 22 degrees, 37 minutes Aries in the 6th house. It is conjunct the sun. So conjunctions are when two celestial bodies are within 5 degrees of each other. Sorry about that. I had to cough real bad because I am so hot. And also, like we said, Chiron along with the sun is opposing the moon. And when something or when two celestial bodies are opposing each other, that is 180 degrees apart from one another. Uranus is in 24 degrees and in 59 minutes of Taurus in the 7th house. In the 7th house is our planetary ruler, or not our planetary ruler, but our house ruler for this full moon, because it is the house that governs Libra's energy. Neptune is also in Aries in the 6th house, and it is also opposing the full moon. As we know, Neptune just moved into Aries. It is at 0 degrees, 15 minutes. Again, in the 6th house also. Pluto, which had a big transition earlier this year permanently, is at 3 degrees and 37 minutes of Aquarius, and it's in the 4th house. The North Node is at 27 degrees and 17 minutes. Pisces is in the 5th house. The South Node is, of course, its opposite correspondence at 27 degrees and 17 minutes of Virgo in the 11th house. And Lilith, or the Black Moon, is at 1 degree Scorpio in the 12th house. And it's also in the same house as this full moon. So that is a full-blown conversation. I want to check and make sure everything is okay. All right. So, what are some of our key astrological events? So, our key astrological events that are currently coming up with this full moon is the sun is conjuncting Chiron. So we just said a conjunction is less than 5 degrees. And this alignment is taking place in the 6th house along with Neptune being there. But Neptune is not a part of this conjunction, but it is a part of the opposition of the full moon. And so basically this specific astrological aspect is highlighting a need, specifically with Chiron being the self-healing aspect of our natal chart. It emphasizes healing and personal development themes, particularly related to 6th house energy, which is our routines and our health. You also have the moon trining or having that positive conversation with Jupiter. Okay. And this is a harmonious aspect, which is promoting emotional growth, but also beneficial transformations, especially in shared resources or intimate matters. Very 8th house energy. Okay. And traditionally, we haven't talked about this yet, but the sun is opposing the moon. And that's what makes a full moon. And it's highlighting the balance between work, 6th house energy, which is what the moon, or which is, I'm sorry, what the sun is in, and also the subconscious or the hidden themes, which is the 12th house, which is where the moon is. Okay. We also have the moon squaring or having a real tense conversation with Mars in Cancer. And so this indicates that there could be, with this full moon, potential tension between what your emotional needs are and some of the actions that you need to take, specifically in the areas of higher learning or 9th house energy, since Cancer, or since Mars is in Cancer in the 9th house. And like we just lastly talked about, the Black Moon, or Lilith, is also in the 12th house along with this full moon. And Lilith is the energy of where you are rejected by society, where people try to get you to be uninvested in certain aspects of your personal power, your empowerment, the chaos, feminine energy portions of who you are, that people are scared of, that the world is scared of, that the system is scared of, and it tries to consistently talk you out of it. Those aspects really are touching on this full moon because it is in the same house as this full moon. really bringing up like our subconscious desires and the hidden aspects of who we are, just because all of the sun's light is shining not only on the moon, but also on the black moon, which is Lilith. All right. So let's hop right into the full moon's energy. And I wish that y'all could have seen, because I actually had the empiricist or the chart that you can do that. But if you purchase the workbook, you will be able to see the empiricist or the chart of this actual full moon. And so the Libra full moon is taking place again, like we said, at 23 degrees and 20 minutes of Libra. This will be the exact position as of like an hour and some change ago at 8:22 p.m., right? And so what we are talking about here is the fact that number one, this full moon affects cardinal signs. Cardinal signs are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, specifically between the third decan degrees of 20 and 29 degrees of those cardinal signs in your natal or in your progress chart. Overall, this moon historically, or all April full moons, are known as the pink moon, and we'll talk more about that. But it's basically to highlight the fact that this is the first full moon since we've had the spring equinox, and it often resembled a lot of the earliest flowers that bloomed on Turtle Island. And this is why it became known as a pink moon, because the old almanac really is a keeper of old indigenous knowledge on Turtle Island. And so what are some of the things that might come up right now as we're treading through this full moon? So we'll be having a check-in around Libra season 2024. We'll be having a 6-month check-in since we are on the Libra Aries axis. And the last time we were on this axis was 6 months ago during Libra season. So during that time period, we had the Libra new moon, right? And we also had the Aries full moon. So think back on that time period, because some of those things, some of those cycles, or some of the things that you initiated during that Libra season new moon might be coming up, or it might be time to check in on some of your intermediate or long-term goals that you established around that time to see how they're coming, see how they're checking in. Also, we had the Libra full moon 2024, which was a year ago. It was a year ago of April 2024. So a lot of the things that you released, a lot of the themes that you were walking through or became aware of, because we know that the illuminating times of a full moon can also be very illuminating to different parts of us that might have been new, or might have been newer journeys or harder journeys. So a lot of times we use this as a 1-year checkup mark for some of the things, some of the themes that we were working through, some of the shadow work portions that we were working through. Again, because we're on a full moon, not a new moon. So we're really not talking about the things that we called in, except for checking in on some of the goals that we had around Libra season and the Libra new moon in 2024. Also, like we talked about, it's the end of the Libra South Node energy. And the South Node was in Libra from 2022 to 2025. Okay, so what's the moon? Okay, so as we know in any portion of the lunation cycle, and I say this all the time, and I'll never stop saying it, because knowledge is the greatest asset that we have. And is that every moon cycle involves the sun and the moon. You can't do a moon cycle without working with both of the energies, because it is the emanating portion of a light where most of light, natural light, comes from within our universe is the sun, and other energies from the sun that might produce light energy, right? And so anytime we're working with the lunar cycle, you're actually just working with how much of the sun's solar energy, solar light, is reflected upon the portion of the moon that's facing us, right? So new moons, it's no light. First quarter moons is 25% light, right? New or full moons is 100% light. Last quarter moons can be between 25% and 50% light too, and technically the same thing with first quarter moons, right? So yeah, And we understand that the moon is an actual celestial body. Of course, if you go outside, you'll be able to see it. Is the Earth's only natural satellite. And it helps to make Earth a more stable place to live, stabilizing our tilt and stabilizing our wobble as we are on an ecliptic circle around Earth, but also as we are on our axis spinning. It typically is between 26,000 to 239 miles away. But it is called from Earth, but it is caught within Earth's gravitational pull. Okay. And so when we are talking about the astrology of the moon, we are often talking about feminine energy or receptive energy that is connected to the fourth house, and it affects our emotions because it is the closest celestial body that we have to Earth. It spends about 2.5 days in each one of the constellations or the zodiac signs, and typically completes the zodiac wheel in about 30 days. Okay. And historically, the astrology of the new moon, or the astrology correspondence of the new moon, is typically very connected to water energy and our emotions, and how both are fluid, how our emotions and water really never stays the same. And in our birth chart, it shows our true self, where we feel the most safe. And also, the moon can stand for mothers, nurturing, or your native home environments through its fourth house energy. Okay. So, what is a full moon? So, from an astronomical perspective, a full moon is when the moon is opposite the sun and the sun's light is fully illuminating the part of the moon that is facing Earth fully, right? So, basically, the Earth is located between the sun and the moon. And the positioning of the sun allows for all of its light to reflect off of the moon from the position that we are able to see, since we're caught in the middle. Okay. From an astrological perspective, this means that there is an opposition. So there's that aspect again between the sun and the moon, or 180 degrees apart. And whenever there's a Libra full moon, we know that the sun is always in Aries and the moon is in Libra, because they are on the same axis, right? And this axis is typically called the axis of self or other, or the axis of interdependence. And we know particularly that this full moon, or what makes this particular full moon, is that both the sun and the moon are exactly at 23 degrees and 20 minutes apart from each other in opposing signs. All right, so historically, what do we use full moons for? So in many ancient cultures, including many African and indigenous cultures or nations, the full moon has been associated with fertility. It's been associated with abundance. It's been associated with transformation, with completion, and with illumination, but also with rest. And because it is a very emotional time, it's a time for us to just kind of come to terms, allow ourselves to feel, allow ourselves to be, and allow ourselves to really embody, but not really to make any plans. Okay. Let me see if I said everything I wanted to say right there, y'all. Hold on. All right, I did. Beautiful. But also, when you're working with full moons, again, full moons is more of a time to receive. It's more of a time for your ancestors, for source, creator, and the deities that walk with you, or that you personally work with, you venerate, are giving you information. So metaphysically, it's a time to receive downloads. It's a time to be embodied. It's a time to rest. It's a time to be relaxed instead of using your willpower. It is also a time to be fully present within your body and fully accepting of outcomes. It's typically a time to reflect upon, because it is the halfway point in a lunation cycle, to check in with the goals that you set during the Aries new moon, especially since it was a solar eclipse, right? So this is a time to reflect over those goals, but also reflect upon the things, the feelings, the energy, the downloads that are coming up for you right now that typically might be hidden or might be a part of the subconscious, because we know that the moon kind of represents hidden things, unconscious things, in addition with places like Pluto and Neptune. but especially this one because this full moon is happening in the 12th house where the black moon or Lilith is. And so more than especially this particular full moon will be about illuminating what's usually hidden or unconscious. It is a time for emotional expression. It is a very emotional time, and it's a time for accepting reality and accepting all the spectrums of emotions that may come up for you, but without feeling shame or judgment or trying to perceive yourself through the lens of others. Most importantly, it's a time for letting go. It's a time for releasing the things that no longer serve you, because you got to do a little bit of work during the last quarter moon, right? To kind of complete some of the things that you set out to do. But also we have the Taurus new moon coming up in 2 weeks. And it's then time to set new goals or time to begin a new portion of a new journey. All right. So typically some historic full moon practices are about celebrating achievement, embracing gratitude, being grateful for what you have, where you are, what you've accomplished, even where you failed, right? And just being okay that is the current place where you are. It's also a time, like we talked about, for self-reflection. And it's also a time for honoring and revering yourself, but others too. And it's a time for resting and releasing. Some of the things typically, like as far as tools that you could use during all full moons, is rainbow moonstone. Now, moonstone is associated with the moon anyways, of course, as you can tell by its name, but particularly rainbow moonstone is known for electrifying or amplifying certain portions of the full moon, particularly about clear cognizance, so clear or divine knowing, but also strengthening of our intuition. Okay, so now we have finally got into Libra energy, baby. And we are at 47 minutes. So let me speed this on up. So here is some of the correspondence for Libra season. Its phrase is I balance is historically known as the zodiac sign that is represented by scales. Its planetary ruler is Venus. Its house rulership is the 7th house, which is the house of intimacy and relationships. And typically we know that because its planetary ruler is Venus, the days of the week that are typically associated with Libra is Friday, okay? We know that Libra is an air sign. It is actually the second air sign, and historically the air signs are associated with intellect, communication, social interaction, so Mercury based things, even though Libra is governed by Venus. We also talked about the planetary influences. It is cardinal energy. So cardinal energy begins a season historically in the zodiac wheel when we're talking about from an equinox perspective, but also it's the initiator of relationships because it also has that initiating energy from a metaphysical perspective, right? So not only does it bring in a fall season, but it is the initiator of connections and relationships. Libra energy is also yang, masculine or action-oriented energy that moves outward in order to create harmony and balance. And some of the energy centers that are typically or historically associated, even though we'll talk about other ones that could be used with this energy, is the sacral energy center, which oftentimes governs your emotions, relationships, sensuality, and pleasure. And the tarot card represented by this is the Justice card. Typically, some of the personality traits associated with Libra energy is known for being diplomatic, harmonious, social, and idealistic. Typically, liking peace, again, harmony, fairness, being social, and aesthetically pleasing things or beauty. Severely doesn't like injustice, being alone, since it is the first sign of expression of other, but also conflict, right? Some of the material correspondence that you use when working with Libra energy historically might be its solar crystal, green aventurine, its birth stone opal, Some other stones that you could work with are diamond, quartz, or marble. Some of its metal, or the metal correspondence that you can use that is associated, is copper. The colors are pink and green, with its birth color being pink, and historically is known for kidney, skin, and lower back as the area or the part of the body that Libra governs, but also governing foods like apples, walnuts, pomegranates, fennel, capers, and another fish. I can't really remember right now. Okay, so let's talk about the Libra constellation. So the Libra constellation astronomically is located in the southern hemisphere of the sky between Virgo, which is to its west, and Scorpio to the east. It has a total of about 85 stars in the constellation, including Methuselah, which is the oldest star in the known universe at approximately 16 billion years old. And this is remarkably old, even said to be older than the actual universe itself from a human perspective, which is about 13 billion years old. And we think that Libra's constellation was the first constellation we tracked as ancient civilizations as we observed the lunar cycle and the Venus cycle before we started to follow the ecliptic cycle of the sun, or our journey around the sun. And so we were able to track Libra's energy while also tracking celestial bodies moving through that portion of the sky, which would have been Venus and the moon. Okay, so overall, what does Libra's energy represent? We know that Libra's energy really teaches us about the power of compromise, negotiations, fairness, and peace. This also might be ruled with the fact that it's related to the seventh house and business. So Libra is the first zodiac sign that allows us to be able to hyper focus on things that are outside of us. And so this is why it governs intimate relationships and different portions of intimate partnerships, because it is a mirror that shows ourselves, sacred mirrors, and allows us to develop empathy for people who are not us. So oftentimes Libra is considered the zodiac of relationships because it helps us to see ourselves through the lens of others, and then to develop empathy and to hold that empathy and that awareness that we have at the core of who we are. Along with that, it governs beauty and refinement. So we know that Venusian energy is really enhanced here when we talk about Libra's energy. And it really governs refinement of beauty. Natural beauty is ruled by Venus's other domicile, Taurus, but refinement, like art, fine art, high fashion, music, things that require a lot of polishing, things that are meant to look aesthetically pleasing but meant to last for a long time, are governed by Libra's energy, right? And also adornment. So anytime you're like me and you're adorned out, you're really giving into Venus's or Libra's energy while doing that. And again, this is more than just about personal relationships. This is about partnerships and agreement. We know that Libra's energy is a lot like Oshun's energy. It governs business overall, like we just talked about. And outside of governing just like partnerships overall, it also governs marriage, contracts, negotiations, business partnerships, business itself, and money. Because in order for all these things to be balanced, there has to be certain agreements. There has to be certain said contracts and adherences and boundaries that we adhere to. Okay, so these are some of the words to embody for Libra's energy. Overall, in the workbook, we highlighted about 12, but there are 4 that are highlighted here. And that is balance, harmony, justice, and beauty. I am not going to say the definitions. All the definitions did come from the Cambridge Dictionary. But if you would like to explore this other aspect of how to work with embodying words, please look at our workbook, okay? All right. I checked in on everything. We are moving back. Okay. So when you are working with balanced Libra energy, you are typically working with energy in its expression that is typically impartial and balanced. So neutral, able to see many different perspectives without judgment, without shame, but also maintaining equilibrium in all sections of life. Like we just talked about, highlighting that Venusian area, but the highly more refined parts of the Venusian energy, it really is about attention to aesthetic detail and practicing beauty in various forms. It's not just about looking beautiful or admiring beautiful things. It is also about producing beautiful things and then taking your time producing those beautiful things. Also, in its highest expression or in its most balanced expression, I don't like using hierarchy-based words. Libra energy is very relational oriented, right? It's really here for making sure that people and their lived experience are centered, and therefore common social contracts and social norms might be really important to Libra, as it is the core of maintaining harmonious connections and partnerships with people and making sure that all people feel safe and included. When we're talking about, this is a funny picture. Every time I look at it, I'm like, gosh, that girl's eyes big. But anyways, when we're talking about unbalanced Libra energy in its expression, often the things that we know are shadow aspects of Libra, which are people pleasing, indecisiveness, codependency, co-enmeshment, and also manipulation, particularly subtle manipulation. Subtle manipulation has a very specific relationship with Libra's energy, Libra's people pleasing, codependency, co-enmeshment energy, but also Scorpio energy, in that is a more, subtle and covert manipulation are not quite the same things. I will say subtle manipulation is governed more so by Libra, while covert manipulation is governed more so by Scorpio. Okay, so Libra's personality overall, I'm sorry, when we skip when we skip stuff and I just keep on going on. Libra's personality overall. So when we're talking about personality in particular, it's really when the sun is in Libra. So this might not represent all aspects of Libra energy, but particularly some aspects that might go along with the sun's energy. So we know that people who have Libra personalities can be very diplomatic, can be very harmonious, can be the person who can be called in and absolve a conflict or get to the root cause of a social conflict, a social chasm, or a violation of social norms and social contracts. But we also know that this is because it's the first partner focused sign. It's the first sign that is not concerned about itself, it's concerned about the experiences of others. And this goes beyond romantic. It is also familial, business, and social in nature. Look, I wonder, could y'all see that advertisement that just came up? Nasty work. Somebody trying to advertise while I am doing my own thing. Okay, so here's some shadow aspects of Libra energy also. When Libra energy doesn't want to dig deep, it's not that it doesn't have the capability to dig deep, especially with it being an air sign and all that rational intelligence, but it's when it doesn't want to, has a tendency to be very superficial, be very shallow, doesn't understand how to have conflict resolution, is overall afraid of conflict, is so concerned with not making a decision, keeping things harmonious, keeping things superficial, right? That it really doesn't get to the root of the problem, nor does it want to get to the root of the problem. We talked about subtle control as being Scorpio, so I wish I could go back and edit this and say that it was more so about well, I guess it is about subtle control or subtle manipulation. Really being strategic in how you communicate with people, how you interact with people, how you socialize with people in order to indirectly influence the outcomes, but without having the backbone to say, like, yeah, I'm doing it, right? Like, that's really a shadow aspect of Libra's energy. Again, we talked about that Libra's ruling planet is Venus. Venus rules over love and relationships, overall, how we connect with others, how we form partnerships, rules over beauty and aesthetics. So our appreciation for beautiful things, for art, for harmony, for pleasure and for comfort, for worth and for values. And right now, Venus is in Pisces at 23 degrees in the fifth house, like we just talked about, from March 27th until April 30th, 2025. One of the things that you really need to understand is that Venus is exalted in Pisces energy. So outside of being in its own domiciles of Taurus and Libra, the other place where it feels like it almost fully expresses itself is in Pisces, because Neptune's energy is a higher exaltation of Venus's energy. I know that might not make sense for people who might be newer to astrology, right? So that means that Venus can act almost in its full capacity when we are there, or when Venus is in Pisces. And so let's talk about what it looks like when Venus is in Pisces. Again, we talked about the exalted position. We know that when Venus is in Pisces, it really has that one consciousness aspect to love, which is it brings unconditional love, creativity, and mystical connections to the relationship. We also know that because of that one consciousness and one love, and the ability for Pisces to feel deeply, because it is the last and the most mature water sign. So it is the most empathetic water sign. It manifests as being deeply empathetic, being able to literally feel people's emotions, be able to feel energy very, very well. Also being creatively inspired, but also might struggle with boundaries if natally your Venus is in Pisces, or right now you're just feeling the collective energy of Venus being in Pisces. This placement is also known for being very creative, very artistic. The thing about water signs and creativity go hand in hand, because water and the metaphysical are really the same thing, right? It's really, water is one of the carriers to the metaphysical along with air energy. And so when we have this particular meeting up of Libra based energy with Venus and then Pisces being here, we often are talking about a very powerful time, sorry about that, of expressing yourself, right? But some of the shadow aspects of Venus energy has been delusional. The Neptunian delusion is crazy, and it's even crazier when Venus is there. So this can create delusions in relationships where you don't see yourself, or you don't see people for who they truly are, and this could cause major disruptions in your relationship when you are not in touch with reality. And it often leads to disappointment and maybe a little bit of disassociation, because you don't want to fix the problem, you want to escape from whatever the problem is. Also, another aspect is being very connected to being a martyr. Venus and Pisces energy, because of its one consciousness, its deep ability to love, its ability to have unconditional love, but also to not have boundaries, is willing to be sacrificial in this relationship, or to put themselves in places of martyrdom and maintain very unhealthy relationships, very codependent and co-enmeshed relationships. Very much so might have not necessarily a good sense of self, right? And there are such things as a healthy form of ego, right? Which could lead to you not getting what you need out of relationships, further enhancing that like Neptunian illusion. Let me see if there were any other things that I wanted to highlight with some of the shadow aspects. Look, nasty work right there too. Want to come back, see how everything is going. All right. So historically, when we work with Venus and Pisces energy, it's a time to work with emotional healing. So it's a time to work with being grounded in this reality, right? And really working with whatever emotional needs, particularly that you can heal from, especially during this time period when we have a full moon in Libra and Venus is in Pisces. It's very much so saying that if you are going to work with Venus and Pisces energy right now, one of the best things that you could do is to focus on your emotional health. What are your emotional needs? What is your sacral and your heart energy center, chakra, or Arturu or ethers saying, right? Another way you can do this is to work with the third eye, right? And work with that energy center to deepen and enhance your lucid dreaming and your dream work, but also connecting with your ancestors. It's a good time, like we talked about, because of its creative elements, to really get in your creative bag, to pick up any of the creative ideas that you never got around to, or you kind of dropped. And it's also a good time for just letting loose and letting your inner child play. It's a time to really work with that fifth house energy of pleasure, but also working with that second energy center, that sacral energy center of pleasure. To work with Venus energy overall is to work with being sensual, is to work with being immersed and fully present in your senses, in your body, and enjoying bodily pleasures. And a lot of times we can do this and enhance this through physical movement, physical touch, good food, aromatherapy, beautifying or adoring ourselves. Those are some of the ways that we can work with Venus energy. Again, we talked about the fact that Venus is in the fifth house. So the fifth house is considered the house of pleasure and fun. And this house is all about what is fun to you. What are the things that are fun? What are the things that you find pleasure in? And it also governs creativity, creating children, self-satisfaction, your love life that does not lead to marriage, because that's governed by the seventh house, right? But it also governs risk taking, having fun, music, and art. Historically, the fifth house is governed by the Leo zodiac and the sun's energy, right? And so when we're sort of talking about how to work with Venus being in the fifth house, we're really talking about making sure that we're making space for radical and radiant selfhood when we're highlighting that Pisces Virgo axis, kind of taking a step away from that one consciousness energy of Pisces and really stepping into the sixth house energy of individualized self-discipline and self-discernment, but doing it in a way that still honors your creativity, your fun, and your individualized expression, because again, the fifth house is governed by the sun, which is also the ego. So it is about your individualized life purpose and self-expression. It's a good time to reclaim joy rituals, doing things that are pleasurable for you and things that are fun for you. It's a good time to go through rebirths as far as your creativity, like we just said, picking up habits, projects, and forms of self-expression that you might not have had time for, or it's a really good time to pick up new ones. And overall, it's a good time, like we just said, to continue to tap into that inner child work of sacred play. Not necessarily healing inner child wounds, but the sacred playing, right? And doing the things that are fun to you, that bring you rest, joy, love, relaxation, right? And please understand that if you're going to work with Venus being in Pisces energy, because Pisces, in the Pisces constellation, Venus is not alone in the Pisces constellation or in the fifth house. You are also working with the North Node, Saturn, and Mercury, which are all in the fifth house right now. And this is really about highlighting the heart's deepest desires, right? Not just for fun, but for soulful, long-term life purpose, spiritually rooted pleasure and self-expression. All right. So the house rulership for this full moon is sorry, catching up with myself and my notes, is the seventh house. And so when we're talking about the seventh house, it is the first house that is not about the self, but rather it's the most basic form of relationships, what we would historically call our intimate or our most personal or impactful relationships, including lovers, business partners, marriages, but even our known enemies. It also includes close family members and close friends. And this house is traditionally, like we just talked about, is ruled by Venus and by Libra. And it reveals how resonance creates purpose, value, and your contribution to society, right? When we're working with the seventh house, it is often about how we connect and how we attract others, but also how we balance giving and receiving. The art of reciprocity is really highlighted in the seventh house, but it's also about how we define ourselves when we are in a relationship. Are you aware of who you are, what your boundaries are, and when another person begins? Or are you a person that might have a hard time kind of identifying the harder boundaries of where you end and another person begins? It also, the seventh house explains that while we as humans have an embodied experience, we need action oriented, outward, and other connection, which really makes a life worth living. We are genetically predispositioned to be tribal and communal people. And so, with that being said, with us being tribal and communal, it's really important to understand that this element will always be highlighted when we're talking about working with the seventh house energy. And since Venus is the house rulership for this, that means, and Libra is the house or is the zodiac that is highlighted during this full moon, it means that we are working with that energy. But it also means that if we're working with the seventh house's energy, we also have to be cognizant of what is going on in the seventh house, right? And so before we talk about the other things that are in the seventh house, I want to talk about what this full moon activation, hold on, y'all, have to get my charger because was not anticipating. So 1 second. Ooh, thank y'all for y'all patience. I had to run and go get the charger, and I am tired and I'm hot. And that water is not hitting like it should today. Anyways, okay. So when we are talking about seventh house energy, and we're talking about the full moon activation that is taking place with this seventh house energy, is talking about our deepest relational pattern, and it's asking us, how do we seek harmony, or what does harmony look like for us through honesty, right? And it's also asking us to shine a light on the health of our intimate bonds and what we need from others, particularly with this full moon, with it taking place on the 6th house, 12th house axes, right? And oftentimes it's talking about what we need from others, what we're willing to give, how we're willing to feel other people's needs. But this full moon is really highlighting for us, especially after everything we went through when Libra's energy, or the South Node was in Libra's energy. We're really talking about the places you've been overgiven. Like, that's what it's really highlighting, and where you've been not telling the truth to yourself first, but also because you haven't been telling the truth to yourself, where you have been withholding the truth from others, particularly in your most important relationships, right? And what does reconciliation, or coming to a common consensus, or releasing look like for those areas, and with those people that you have not been telling the truth with, right? And so oftentimes we can have a lot of relationship or relational downloads when we are focusing on Libra's energy, seventh house energy, Venus energy. But especially since some of this is taking place in the 12th house, it could be like some of the deeper aspects of things that you've been trying to put off. Okay. And so another component and aspect, and I'm actually just going to go back to the other one that we need to talk about, is what currently is in the seventh house. So Uranus is currently in the seventh house. Okay. And so Uranus has been in Taurus for a very, very very, very long time. And Uranus is the planet of awakening. It is governed by Aquarius. I often say that Uranus is the celestial body in the solar system that is responsible for getting us to where we're going. Now, keep in mind, the sun is literally moving through the universe right now. So when you wake up, when you close your eyes, when you blink 3 times, you are never in the same spot in the universe because you're caught in the gravitational pull of the sun. And the sun is literally jetting across the universe, and we have no idea where it's going. We have no idea where the final destination is. Whew. And Uranus is that outer planet, that outer huge planet that is deeply concerned about propelling us forward. And it really doesn't care at a collective level at that. So it doesn't really care about your feelings. It doesn't care about your emotions. It doesn't care about the generational curses that you and your family has been through. It doesn't care about your family's history. It doesn't care about your history. It only cares about getting us wherever that final place where the sun is taking us is, right? And it also governs freedom, like sovereignty, but it also governs humanitarianism because of its connection to Aquarius. And when all of this comes together, particularly in the seventh house, and the seventh house is about relationships, what we have really been changing is the foundation of our relationships for the totality of the time that Uranus has been in the seventh house, in that Taurus energy, right? Because or not in the Taurus energy, but it is in Taurus, number one, and then it is in the seventh house. So it's double Venus energy. So it's all about reshaping your relationships, but especially your intimate relationships. And so there could have been a lot of, because man, I think at least for a half decade, Uranus has been here. So this energy really could be explaining why there has been a lot of shakeups in a lot of your most intimate relationships over the past half decade or so. And that's because of the impact of Uranus. And the reason why this is because in our society, at a collective here on earth, there were just too many points of relational energy that was rooted in people not knowing themselves fully, people not being sovereign. And the whole point of all of us evolving and incarnating and coming to this earth school is for some form of a life purpose, whatever it is. And oftentimes, if you are not fully sovereign, you are at the risk of not executing whatever that said soul contract is. Uranus can't have that. Uranus in Taurus in the seventh house damn sure isn't having that. And so really this transit has been all about inspiring us to understand what the cultivation of sovereignty or selfhood, seventh house or first house energy, right, looks like when we're talking about seventh house energy, right? So the first house and seventh house are also on the same axis as Aries and Libra. So it's again that axis of self versus other, the axis of interdependence. And in order to be interdependent, you have to be self-aware, you have to be sovereign, and you have to be proud of that. Like there can't be any shame around taking up all of your space, right? Which sometimes that can be an issue if you're in relationships with people who don't value your sovereignty or who don't know how to love you without controlling you, which is another aspect that is deeply highlighted when Uranus is in Taurus, okay? And so this is saying that, do you know how to be in deep relation and still keep a sense of freedom, but also still give the people that you love their sovereignty and their freedom too? Do you know how to love yourself, and do you know how to love other people as you both grow, evolve, and change? Are you there to be a witness in that person's life, or are you there to direct a person in the direction that you think that they should go based off of your perception of them? And is your perception of them right? And is their perception of you right? And is it healthy? Like those are the questions that come up when Uranus is in Taurus, right? But it's here to also model forms of new relationships. I can say for myself that since Uranus has been in Taurus and my Venus is in Taurus, so I think I'm very keen on speaking on this issue. And my Mercury is in Taurus in my seventh house. Um, it's really about building relationships, new forms of relationships that are not built upon old social norms that don't serve you or don't serve that person, are based upon how a yite, capitalistic, all them things, sort of society needs you to keep you self unaware, to keep that person self unaware, and to make sure that y'all don't love each other in an unconditional way, right? But it's often asking us like to operate from our authentic selves. Like, because Aquarius energy and thus Uranus energy governs collective awakening, collective humanitarianism, collective values, morals, ethics, right? It's really about awakening to how to love freely in partnerships. How to love freely in partnerships, y'all. Okay? In that part of the workbook is a really awesome journal reflection about how to understand this. So please purchase the workbook and please work through that portion, okay? All right, now we're going to get into the Libra full moon activation, okay? And so, with this, we need to understand that this Libra full moon is a cardinal ruled full moon. That is the ruler of this, or the modality ruler of this full moon. And again, we know that all cardinal signs, so cardinal signs are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, are all initiators. We know that Libra is the energy of initiating the fall equinox into our lived reality, but is also the initiator of emotions, harmony, and relationships. Okay. And so when we're talking about Libra's energy, we're often talking about the initiation of relationships and harmony through a balanced exchange of ideas, particularly because it is cardinal air energy. So this cardinal air energy is really where we honor the more rational aspects also of Libra's energy, and making sure that we are creating social balance. We have great communication and we're just relational in nature, right? And so, again, at the heart of all of this, with that cardinal energy, it will be highlighted in this full moon through relationship revelations that we just talked about, especially because this full moon is taking place in the 12th house and Uranus is there. So there could be a shift in how you see yourself. I had a big breakthrough on Wednesday. I don't want to talk about it, but it's also how you can see a partner. I've been seeing people very differently lately, and I have been making decisions about that. I've also been making space in my life for new friends, but to also see people who've been in my life for a while, in different ways too. I will say overall for the best, because my friends are awesome, especially as I'm going through many different changes and transitions myself. It continues to amaze me. But as we also maybe talked about on my TikTok, during this time period could also be a time when you understand who isn't a part of your tribe, who isn't on your team. And so there was a person who decided to assault my body and my physical property while this axis was highlighted. And that person in the freezer, y'all. And I mean, I wrote their name and put them in the freezer from Hoodoo style, if you know what I'm saying. I don't mean nothing about nothing that broke the law. Anyways, this is also a time period after we've had so much Libra energy being in restriction to understand this is about harmony. As we can see by the collective that is going on in the world, which is also could be an understanding of many of our internal worlds. This is also a time where Libra's energy, the seventh house's energy, can teach us how we can have balance while still calling in that creativity, still calling in that inner child love and work, and still calling in the truth in transforming our partnerships, all of the things that are taking place either in the fifth house, which has a lot to do with this full moon, or the seventh house, which is the ruler of this full moon. Because this full moon is taking place in the 12th house, it is also about uncomfortable truths, deep boundary work, and really saying goodbye. Saying goodbye to people, to ways of life, to events, to mindsets that truly no longer serve you. And because of the full moon happening in the 12th house and Lilith being there, it's also a time where these things can't be hidden anymore. It's obvious. And it's also a time to do a deep relationship check in with yourself. How is your relationship with yourself? And how is your relationships, like your most intimate relationships? What is the health of them? Do they give you what you need? Are you giving? Those are the things that really could come up right now, okay? And we just talked about Uranus in the 7th house. We are talking about air, so we just talked about that element of air. So we know that Libra is the second sign. We know that Libra is the second sign of the air element in the zodiac, and we know that it's initiator and it maintains balance and clarity, but also forms of communication, right? And it really is all about using connection and balance to be the currency to make change and transformation feel safe in our ways of life. Hold on, I don't want to get too close to the mic because it creates a terrible feedback. But oftentimes, this is about how Libra energy uses its rational intelligence to be the diplomat and navigate relationships, being fair, being balanced, having that strong sense of justice, but also honoring what traditions are, calling in new things, but also having a charm and wit that is undeniable, even if you don't agree. Okay, so when we're talking about, and we've already talked about the cardinal energy, but just wanted to reinitiate that oftentimes we're talking about when Libra energy comes up, but right now with this full moon, it's about the initiation of relationships and the exchange of ideas, that more rational energy like we talked about, but also what diplomacy and what harmony looks like in your relationships. And so right now, since Libra rules over fall energy when light and dark are meeting in balance, and we just crossed over the spring equinox about 2 weeks ago, this full moon is really inviting us to recalibrate our relationships, our agreements, especially those business and those money agreements, especially those little tiny contracts, like the apps that you never use but you pay for, but also your emotional ecosystems. This full moon brought up for me places that I was spending time at that ended up not being relational to my emotional health because it involved people who were not concerned with my emotional health, which is very typical of this full moon, right? And since Libra is masculine energy, but it is ruled by Venus and it is initiating energy, so it knows the right time to begin things, it doesn't really rush. It's all about you being ready when you are ready. And this also is activating what we would call a cardinal cross. Because or a cardinal cross with those late degree cardinal signs. That's why this full moon is so powerful for those late degree um, cardinal signs, because when you experience a cardinal cross in the collective astrology, right, it really does bring up a conversation about relational imbalances within relationships, but also what does justice look like. This moon, as we talked about, is historically so called a pink moon by indigenous nations, and I don't know why I didn't see that very Japanese Shinto inspired temple behind us, even though we're talking about an indigenous Island name. But historically on Turtle Island, this is called the pink moon, and this is because a lot of early flowers are either yellow or like a soft pink that bloom in spring, which is a sign that spring has arrived, that life has renewed, that the spring equinox it has happened. And it's also a sign after winter's dormancy that there is alchemy, there is transformation, there is change. But this is Aries season, and Aries is very direct, is very truthful. So this is all about how spring calls in new truths, new ways of life, and new understanding. But since we just had an equinox that just crossed, and this is the first moon, full moon since the spring equinox, it's also a time to reflect on harmony and balance. And what does harmony and balance look like in your life? Since day and night are pretty much equal around this time of year. Okay. So we talked about the Libra Aries axis that is brought up. We decided to call it here within the apothecary, outside of the axis of self or other, or the axis of interdependence, the dance of self and others. So this is that tightrope that we always have to walk between what's your individual life purpose and what's your responsibility, or what are the things that you want or you need to do and get from others or provide for others. So it is the conversation of who am I versus who am I with you. And this teaches us that you can have true connection without having to go through self-abandonment or without having to be like codependent or co-enmeshed. And you can have a sense of self, a strong sense of self, right? Especially with Chiron being in Aries right now, and still be able to be in deep, very close and intimate personal relations with others. And again, there has been a restriction on relational energy because Libra was in the South Node for a very long time, from 2023 to 2024, even though I said 2022 all up and down this PowerPoint. I'm sorry, y'all. But for the past 18 to 21 months, we had a restriction of that energy. And this is the first full moon, so the first full illumination of lunar Libra energy, where we are experiencing maybe like a fresh breath of air in a lot of our relationships. Okay, checking the time. We are doing well. Computer is glitching though, because I know she hot. She been working hard today. Anyways, we are about done. This is the 6-month mirror for how to work with that axis that is currently brought up right now. So we talked about 6 months ago, it was Libra season. A year ago was the Libra full moon and some of the things that might come up during that time period. So you can review that really quickly. This work through is also in a lot of detail in the workbook. So a year ago, like we said, we had that Libra full moon in Aries. So we were in completely that nodal activation. It took place in the 6th house. Aries in the 6th house. What was going on was Chiron and a few other things were taking place in that house during that nodal activation. And some of that energy, like Chiron, still being present in Aries while the sun is in Aries. Was really highlighted again last year because the sun and Chiron around this time last year was in the 6th house, which meant that this full moon was also in the 12th house last year. So it was again a bunch of, maybe we're refining or we're having some final revelations around things that we might have started to really understand the patterns of right around last year, especially with basically the full moon taking place in the same literal house placement as it was in, just in different degrees, right? And what this information was really here to teach us is that a lot of those lessons right now, you should be gaining wisdom or integration, or really starting to understand some of the patterns in your relationships, especially that involved like unconscious patterns, unconscious relational behaviors, that you really are at a place where you're ready to change now. Okay, so this is a Libra new moon. So oftentimes we'll talk about what it is natally, but also collectively when the moon is in Libra. So when the moon is in Libra, we are really talking about a person who at their heart of hearts is concerned with keeping harmony and keeping everything in balance. This person has a really deep need, or you could feel this way right now, for fairness, for justice, for emotional connection, but a sense of partnership. It's an instinctive need to really be a person who is willing to smooth over things, have harmonious conflict resolution where you're able to hear out both sides and really be a bridge for different or opposing viewpoints. And you really thrive when you get to a point where relationships are harmonious and can reflect back beauty to you. Some of the strengths or some of the things that might happen naturally in a good way when the moon is in Libra is charming, diplomatic, graceful, being fair-minded, being thoughtful, being excellent in partnership, and also having a strong sense of justice. Some of the challenges we can experience when the moon is in Libra might be struggling with indecisions, becoming emotionally dependent upon people. Again, that codependency, co-enmeshment, not having a strong sense of self, sensitive to conflict, or being very passive to conflict, or not knowing how to have proper conflict resolution. But also it could be where you lose personal direction, and some of these things you could naturally, air quotes, suffer from if you have that natal placement. Checking the time and checking my computer. Okay, so here are some of the themes for this Libra full moon. The wounded healer. With Chiron being in Aries opposing this full moon, again, that is the same activation that happened last year of deep emotional pain connected to relationship patterns and self-worth, right? With Neptune now moving out of its domicile of Pisces and then moving into Aries, you could feel a lot of fog, or like spiritual fog or mental fog lifting, right? Especially because Venus and Mercury ingress back into Pisces, kind of enhancing that overall foggy feeling that we might have been feeling during Pisces season earlier this year. But also, yeah, in general, because Pisces had been, or Neptune had been in Pisces for quite a while. So now that that is happening, you might feel more clear about your emotions, more clear about your direction, more clear about your relationships, etc. Right? This could be a time period where you are having a spiritual rebirth or an artistic rebirth, which is a form of a spiritual rebirth. And since the South Node is in Virgo in the 11th house, it also might call for a little bit of understanding maybe your social roles where you've been overgiven, where reciprocity hasn't been given back to you, in your sense of belonging. Okay. And some other aspects that come up with this full moon, particularly that I wanted to take more time to highlight, is that Lilith is deeply impacting this new moon or this full moon. It is taking place in the same house because even though it's in a different astrological sign or constellation, it's still in the same house. And this oftentimes can represent portions of our life that are very, very suppressed. We might associate suppressed energy with Pluto's energy, but that's more so unconscious. Suppressed energy are the things that you work hard to suppress a lot, and it is embodied by Lilith's energy because society has told you time and time again, and maybe even through lifetimes or epigenetically, that it isn't safe to manifest those traits. And so it is more so the primal feminine traits that are often suppressed in society, that could come up during this full moon. And it could bring awareness to the forms, with it being in Libra and that Scorpio energy of subtle and covert control in relationships, especially through ancestral, um, it could be ancestor related. So what do we mean by this? What we really mean by this is the ability for you to lose yourself and get into relationships where forms of covert and subtle manipulation might exist, and it might be something that has existed within your bloodline for generations. And so with this full moon, it's a really powerful time to do shadow work, do journaling, do dream journaling, and also do work to really appreciate and accept the inner primal feminine dark energy that exists in you. And if you do these things right, and I can attest to this by what happened to me on Wednesday, you will receive emotional liberation. There was something I had a breakthrough around in deep meditation and prayer that I knew I had healed through many different lifetimes. Like, this was a wound that was so deep within my soul that it was something that came from this, like, before this lifetime. And so those are some of the themes that can come up during this full moon. Some of the magic that you can do is harmony in relationships. relationally, how if you are experiencing imbalance in relationships, you need clarity or energy around imbalance in relationships, and also using that Uranus in seventh house energy. This is a really good time to do harmony rituals. Of course, it's ruled by Venus, so any Libra full moon is a good time to do glamour and beauty magic. Okay. And this enhances your self-confidence, your magnetism, and just their overall beauty. It's also a good time to do love spells. It's not that I'm opposed to love spells. It's I'm opposed to people's understanding of spells. Like, for example, on Thursday morning, I did a self-love spell on myself, right? And I'm of the belief that, baby, listen, I don't need to do a love spell on nobody else. I don't need to do a bunch of things. I can just do it on myself, and I pretty much does get what I need. So this is a good time to do a self-love spell. Jasmine, check that. But if you do other love spells, this is an overall good time to do it. And I am neutral. I will not judge you because I'm not you. So some of the correspondence or things that you can do, we've already talked about this early in the presentation, is you can work with pink. I have pink altar candles on my altar right now. You can also work with green. These colors evoke the energy of peace, but also heart chakra, or heart energy center alignment. You can also use diamonds, quartz, and marbles, or especially rose quartz, to intensify this energy. Copper is a great metal to use for any Libra energy, but also all the previous rituals that we just talked about. You can definitely use copper for those, and it very much so is close to the frequency of Venus, so it helps you hone in, amplifying those harmonious spells, those beauty magic spells, those self-love spells, right? So, and I gotta go to this part in the notes because everything I want to talk about is right here. Okay, so what we need to understand about this full moon is like the dichotomy that naturally exists in Libra's energy. So the natural tissue state of Libra's energy is a dry tissue state, and a damped, relaxed tissue state. So when it's imbalanced, or when there are physical imbalances in Libra's energy, it could manifest as dehydration, brittle hair, poor skin tone, or emotionally feeling like burned out, right? But when Libra energy is in balance, it more so represents like a relaxed, damp tissue state, more so like a late spring, early summer day, right? And this is because it is the movement of stagnation. And this, oh, my bad. So this can often show up as stagnation or indecisiveness or other things. So Libra's energy, the way that it shows up is either one or the other. You either exist in hot, dehydrated, a hot, dry tissue state, or a damp tissue state, because it balances the scales, or it is represented by the scales. You can never get both, right? And so some of the energy systems that are governed by Libra, keeping that in mind, that it's very hard. I don't want to say it's very hard to get equilibrium in a natural Libra energetic state when it is embodied like in this reality. But what I'm saying is these are very delicate parts of the body that you sometimes have to pay attention to in order to maintain balance. And it is the kidney, the urine systems, urinary tract systems. It also is the endocrine or the hormone system, your veins or your acidity balances. So whether you are very like alkaline or acidic, right? Also your lower back and your posture, who very much so work on that right now. And also your elimination centers. So like your butt. Right. And so these are areas and parts of your body that you might want to call in more healing focus to during this time period, because it governs that. So this could be a really good time period to meet up with your Western traditional MD doctor, or your holistic, more homeopathic practitioners, and or both. This might be a good time period to do Reiki, somatics, and other things that focus on this area. And it's a really good time to do massages, or if you do self massages, kind of focusing on these areas. Okay. we're in the workbook, we talk more about what is a guardian or what is a remedy herb. Sorry, I'm blanking out because it's almost 11 o'clock, y'all. And what I will say is guardian herbs protects Libra's energy more. So these are some of the guardian herbs: Damiana, violet, and rose, that are associated with Libra's energy. These are the remedy herbs. So remedy helps with imbalances in Libra's energy. So it's nettle, goldenrod. Please be careful with goldenrod. Goldenrod is very in danger right now. So if you could more so focus on mullein, burdock, and nettle, that would be amazing. All right. I have to move my foot because, gosh. Woo. Okay. So the energy centers that you can focus on for this full moon are the heart chakra and, again, traditionally the sacral chakra. We're also calling them energy centers or Arturu or Aether from now on. We do not want to be appropriative. And so you can pause because we've been on here for a while and take a look at this. You can also buy the workbook that will guide you through this fully. Yo. Ooh. Okay. We got way far ahead. Okay. These are some of the other Libra associated allies that might not necessarily be guardian or remedy herbs. So rose, lavender, chamomile, mugwort, and again, blue lotus or damiana are all herbs that you can work with when working with Libra's energy. Now, here is the part where I wanted to talk about us making sure we are reframing from calling energy centers chakras. And it's because we don't come from the Hindu tradition. So we come from the African and the indigenous tradition. So this would be more so for us called Arturu or Aether, which is singular, right? Because chakras is a Sanskrit term from South Asian spiritual systems that does have a lot in common because they are our long lost brethren, for real, because Kemet is right there, right? And we know how humanity spread right throughout the world, and that we all originally came from Africa. But this is not our immediate indirect bloodline, nor is it our culture. So even if this was your entry point into a spiritual system, when we're talking about the energy centers of the body, it is important that we not call energy centers chakras anymore. Okay, so they're called Aturu from the Kemetic spiritual science tradition, which means like little balls or ball energy centers, right? And that's what we used in our Egyptian cosmology. In Yoruba, it is simply called Ori, like your highest self, because it is how you channel down your plasma energy or your highest self's energy, right? And then also in Arturu or energy centers in Hoodoo, we typically just called it body wisdom. We typically just called it coming home, coming back to your roots. Those are some of the ways that we focused on energy healing. Laying hands, having a prayer closet. Those are some of the things and ways in which we used energy centers in the Hoodoo tradition. Okay, y'all. We are damn near at 2 hours. Let's wrap this up. Okay, so again, the primary Kemetic energy centers that we are focusing on is, and keep in mind, we also talked about energy centers in a more traditional way that you can work with them if you are not Black or Indigenous. If you are Black or Indigenous, this is the particular way to work with the Libra full moon, to work with the heart Aether and the womb Aether or the sacral Aether. And this is also a time to do ancestral reclamation by making sure you call these energy centers Arturu, because some of your ancient ancestors call them that, or call them Aether, call them Ori, called it body healing, body magic. So lean into using those words during this time period. Okay. This is a prayer for liberation as you are beginning to do your hoodoo work under this Libra full moon. If we had more time, I would explain it. For our hoodoo root work practitioners, this time period is a really good time with this Libra full moon to do conjure work for beauty, for balance, and also for boundaries, reversal spells. It's a really good time to focus, truly focus on ancestral practices that involve the earth, that involve indigenous rites of calling things down into the earth. Some of the things that you might be able. Sorry, y'all. I don't like the way this read out. So here, let me go to these notes, because I hate when my notes and my what I was trying to say don't line up. So here, liberation prayer. Okay. So one of the things that I want to back up and say is this. Number one, hoodoo is a closed practice, particularly to people who are of Black American descent. So if you are not initiated, have a church connection, family association, or a formal initiation into this, this is the part where you revere or pay reverence to, but do not participate in. And under this Libra full moon, it's really all about balance and being in the right relationships. It's a time for peaceful reversals and spiritual alignment and conjure work that calls in a lot of justice work. It's also a really good time to do a lot of beauty work. It's also a good time to do self-love spells like I did on Wednesday. And it's really a time to focus on workings that are for love, fairness, beauty, protection, and relational healing. So here's some of the practices, and when you buy the workbook, it'll walk you through fully everything to do for the Hoodoo Libra practices. We will be talking about a floor sweep and wash for emotional balance. The purpose of this is to clear stagnation, confusion, people pleasing, and flow. The ideal time, and if I would have got the workbook out sooner to do this, would have been 1 to 2 days before the full moon, but you can still do this on the full moon or 3 days after the full moon. Pause to read my additional notes. Also buy the workbook to get the additional notes. You can do sweetening work or sweetening spells or sweetening rituals for harmony. And this is to increase your softness, your magnetism, and to get to resolution when there might be tenseness or denegotiations or situations where there seem to not be able to have a resolution. The best day to do this is on the day of the full moon. So the best time to do that would have been while the sun was still up. But of course, we're live here almost at midnight. So yeah, it's a good time to do mirror work, not just beauty work, but mirror work for self-reclamation. So this could be in times where you've been overgiving, oversharing, or you've given away your power to people. This is a good time to recall back your own power by mirror reclamation work. We'll also be doing dream bowl work. So that is to lay out a bowl of water on your altar or your bed or somewhere close to you while you sleep, right? And it's to receive ancestral guidance on the dreamscape, but also if you're indigenous, it will cause you to dream walk. So I just really hope you understand, especially if you put that water under your bed, you gonna dream walk. So wanted to overly highlight and say that get the workbook. It'll walk you through all of these and how to do it. Okay. These are some of the herbs and the specific ways that we use them in the hoodoo tradition when we're doing conjure work, when we're doing more comedic practices or ritual work, or when we're doing indigenous land rites. And it is rose, which is used for the floor washes that we just talked about, but also used in love work. Like we talked about, a really good time to do self-love work or mirror work, beauty work too. Mugwort is good. You can do that by either burning it, smudging it, smoking it, or making a tea in order to do the dream work. So that would be a very, very good time to use that. Also, lavender and yarrow are both found in the indigenous and the hoodoo tradition as protectors and used in charm bags and mojo bags. Or you can use it on your altars in spirit work. I use rose on my altars this go around, dry rose, because I already had them drying down. And then if you want to do so more in the Kemetic tradition, making sure they use blue lotus, as that is a native to Egypt, or Kemet. And that is also very good for dream work, intuition work, ancestral guidance. Okay, so this was the theme for the new moon, or this Libra full moon. So when I was channeling and everything was coming to me, the songs that came to me for this moon was Wildflower by New Birth. It is a song that came out in the 70s. I love New Birth. You should listen to their whole discography. And it was just like, what is that? Cry, she's a lady, for she's a lady. And it's the lyrics, y'all. So let her cry, for she's a lady. Let her dream, for she's a child, right? And this was perfect to me, talking about recapturing for that inner child work, doing that joy ritual work with all that 5th house energy, 12th house energy, 7th house energy that's coming up, falling back in love with yourself, with your own creativity, especially with Venus being in Pisces right now, while this full moon is going on. For the 12th house energy, the relational energy, letting things go, releasing energy, Butterfly by Mariah Carey. Spread your wings and prepare to fly. I can't sing, y'all. For you have become a butterfly. So fly abundantly into the sun. She says abundantly. I say abundantly because I'm not Icarus. Yeah. So this is a good time in that song you can do as a sensory altar while you're doing that mirror work, while you're doing that reclaiming work. It's also a beautiful song to fall to sleep to, if you're about to dream walk. The book that really embodies this energy is Pleasure Activism by Adrienne Marie Brown. Child, I didn't capitalize nothing. I'm making her bell hooks. And this is really about that joy is a part of justice. It is a part of sovereignty. It is a part of creativity. It is a part of sensuality. And this book is the manifesto to that. The whole complete body of work that really encapsulates what this full moon is all about is The Age of Pleasure by Janelle Monáe. I told y'all when we were talking about Leo's energy and the 5th house energy a couple weeks back during the Leo full moon, or a couple of moon cycles back, that we would be talking about this again. I meant it. So all this energy is the energy that you can use to amplify this full moon. You can either read this book, listen to Wildflower by New Birth, Butterfly by Mariah Carey, or you can listen to The Age of Pleasure by Janelle Monáe. This just highlights the Libra moon cycle. This Libra moon cycle that will be active in 2025 is about balance, beauty, boundaries, and belonging. So it was just telling you the different ways that you work with the different portions of the Libra lunar cycle in 2025. This also tells us when each of these lunation points will be happening, right? So we already had the last quarter moon that happened January 20th, 2025 at 8:31 p.m. in 0 degrees Libra. Crazy, right? I thought the sun was saying came. Yeah. And now we are currently at April 12th, 2025 at the full moon. We now have the upcoming new moon in October and the first quarter moon in July. And that is the end, y'all. Thank you so much for being here. Please buy this workbook. Please buy this workbook. I need a better camera. I'm going to hop off of here because we've been on here for 2 hours. It is all love. It's a nice night. It's a nice night. Go out and stargaze. Put on the simmer pot. Do that mirror work. Do that beauty magic. Do all of it. Also, for our people who are not of Black or Indigenous descent,